content warnings for this episode include transphobia, hospitalization, including details of experiencing illness, social exclusion, and bullying.
Welcome to GenderMeowster Podcast Network. Genderful is a talk show featuring non-binary and trans folks discussing various topics and special interests. We kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of identities. All opinions are the speaker's own. This show airs live on Twitch at twitch.tv/GenderMeowster, and VODs with show notes can also be found on YouTube.
So hi everyone, I'm GenderMeowster. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to let my guest introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name's Christopher Ikonomou, also known as cpikoart on Instagram and Etsy, etc., etc. I use he, him, and ze, them pronouns. Oh my god, your cat is so cute. And special interest-wise, I'm an artist, I'm an activist in disability and queer and trans circles, especially at my university, and unrelated, I love The Walking Dead and Phoebe Bridgers. That's my entire personality summed up.
I love that. Well, my furry co-host today is Neferkitty. She's about 10 years old, and she's a calico, for those who can't see her if you're listening to the podcast later. Yeah, she'll be in and out today, I have a feeling. She's very good at her job. Sometimes she sleeps on the job, but she's still doing it, even when she's asleep. It's amazing. My special interests might include cats. Let's be real. So, Christopher, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know that we were going to have you a while ago, and then we had to reschedule, but maybe it worked out for the best because you're in a lovely space now.
Yeah, I'm back at university. I got a MacBook Pro, so that it's good. My MacBook Air probably would have exploded if we had done it 2 months ago. So good coincidence.
It all worked out in the long run. Well, I am so grateful to have you here today. So there's a couple questions I like to ask all of my guests, just because it's interesting to interview gender diverse people about the same thing and see what their different answers are. So I'm curious, what are some things that you can maybe trace back to your youth that indicated you might be trans or gender diverse one day?
Yeah, so when I first came out as trans, I didn't consider myself to be one of those trans people who knew when they were 5 or when they were really young. And the first realization I had about it was actually from my older sister. And she's like, looking back at all those photos of you when you were a little kid, I don't think you had a gender as a child. And I was like, oh, well, that's convenient because that's how it ended up later in life. But yeah, as a little kid, I never, felt super inclined to be really feminine or be pushed into a really feminine gender role. My mom is incredibly multi-talented and from the arts to sports to science. So, there was never a push to be very traditional or, fit into traditional feminine gender roles. And that allowed me a lot of space to explore, which was really cool, even if I didn't really know what exploring was as a little kid. And I also had hair similar to what I have now because TMI, I used to eat my hair as a little kid. So we had to cut it really, really short. So when you look at young pictures of me, you might not even know that I'm trans at first glance because I basically look like a tinier version of what I am now. So yeah, signs you see in hindsight, I guess, even if I came out in high school.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to me, as someone who came out at 25 or 27, coming out in high school sounds outrageously young.
I felt outrageously young, honestly, but you know what? It's good. I'm glad. I mean, we all have our different journeys, of course. You are incredibly valid for coming out later in life. I have a good friend named Arthur who lives in the Pacific Northwest, who I met online, who came out later in life, and I love him. And I love we get to go on our little trans journeys together, even if
That's wonderful.
he's very clearly a millennial and I'm Gen Z.
Well, my spouse came out when she was 39. So,
Oh
there's
wow,
always time. There's always time. Yeah. I knew
never
people
too
that have
late.
come out in their 60s or 70s too. So, it's it happens when it happens. So, Christopher, how has your relationship to gender evolved over time? So, you talked about, when you were a kid, you just sort of look like a smaller version of you today. But maybe your interior journey shifted over time, perhaps. Because there was a moment where you, for example, chose a neopronoun. Um, I'm curious about some of those parts of your journey.
Yeah, so as I said, as like a little kid, I didn't really have any kind of established gender. Like, and I know we're going to get into this later, but I was diagnosed with a disability really, really young.
Mm-hmm.
So I had various limitations that would separate me from my peers during like PE and other circumstances because I had like physical limitations. And as I was growing up in like elementary school and middle school and like going through puberty, um, instead of like feeling forced to go into a feminine gender role or anything like that, I kind of just wanted to experiment that way because I had always worn shapeless hoodies and jeans for my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So going into high school, I was like, maybe I'll wear shorts and ripped pants, which are not inherently feminine, obviously. But my older sister was like, I just graduated high school. Do you want my cute clothes? And I'm like, absolutely. And then I wore them for 2 weeks. And then I'm like, wow, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life. Um, so maybe I am not a girl after all. So yeah, it was a long period of like never really identifying with anything, not consciously being like, oh, I'm agender or anything like that, but just like up until early teens, I was just like, yeah, I exist as the tall kid with glasses. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of the gist of my internal identity.
Yeah.
And come like leaving high school, I moved to LA to go to university. One of my online friends was just like experimenting with neopronouns, and I was like, I'll take a look at this incredibly long list of things I've never seen before. It was like one of those master lists of like hundreds and hundreds of neopronouns. Um, and I saw ZZM and I was like, that's kind of just cool. So I like I started to use it and it felt like really connected to that kind of shapeless, genderless blob that I was as a kid, where, I didn't exactly feel like I, fit in with my peers in any sort of gendered way or even in just any way in general because of how I grew up as disabled.
Mm-hmm.
So those quote unquote weird letters, X gets a bad rap, um, kind of just fell into that part of me that I hadn't really come to terms with until I was in college. It's like, oh, it's okay to be the kind of weird little void boy that I was as a little kid, and I can embrace that and feel comfortable doing that. And I've used them ever since. And as many ebbs and flows as neopronoun discourse happens on the internet, I always feel like really good that I made that decision to embrace that part of myself.
I love that. Um, I mostly use they, them for myself. And now for Kitty has been she, her for 10 years, so it'd be weird to change it on her now. But I adopted two kittens this year. And so I decided that one of them is she, per, P-E-R, like person.
Oh my God. Perfect.
And
Perfect. Sorry.
exactly, perfect. You got it. We love puns. Puns are very good. And I can't remember if Cleo is also she, per, or if Cleo's like she, Fey or something. Um, Cleo's our youngest. She's not even 6 months old yet, so there's still
Oh,
time
so
to
cute.
discover her pronouns. But it's fun because sometimes the cats will be like on stream, so I'll put their pronouns next to their names, and so you'll see like Beatrix, sheep, her. It's so
OMG.
cute.
That's so cute.
Yeah, she Fay. That's right. She fair. She Fay fair. Um, Cleo is she Fay. That's right. She's a little magical fairy cat. But neopronouns are just so fun. They're like creative.
People are so mean about them. They're just so it's a little whimsy in your everyday life. Like,
Yeah.
it's when and I was of course like nervous to start using neopronouns because
Hmm.
luckily when I entered college it was like starting to become the norm for like professors in discussions to be like, okay, everybody name major pronouns if you want to share. And like being the only person who uses neopronouns in the room is always, I'm sure it's also scary to be the only person who uses they them in the room, right? It's similar. um
It's yeah. It's
where
an
it's like
experience.
it's an experience for sure. um and even if like the people in the room just use he him, which is like fine by me, like dysphoria wise or whatever, like it's just kind of nice to have it up out in the air and like feel comfortable enough in myself and also safe enough to express that. And like when one of the people who works for the LGBT center on campus like publicly used Z here in along with he him and his email signature, I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. Like it's nice and
Yay.
it's kind of normal, which is of course normal isn't the goal, but it still feels good to like
It's
know that you're not
normalizing.
the only one. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I love that. That's so good. I feel like I had another pronoun story to tell you, but I forgot now. Oh, what I don't like is when people hear they, them, or neopronouns and then decide they're going to troll you with their answer to what are your pronouns.
Oh,
It's like,
normal, the classic. The classic.
yeah,
I saw
it's,
this TikTok
I
that
love it.
was like, um, misogynistic cis boys use bro as a neopronoun without knowing it. They're like, oh, bro is just talking, or like, that's bros. And I'm like, little do you know. Little do you know. Yeah. I try to ignore it. But if I'm ever like in person with someone like that, I can just be like, shut up. You're not funny. Sorry. You're really not. Make a joke that's funny and maybe I'll laugh.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Actually, in my freshman year, back before COVID, which seems like forever ago, uh, I like I said, it was like starting to be normal to ask for pronouns like between people, and I was playing Cards Against Humanity, which is already not a good start, with like some people from my dorm floor, and um, we're of course like new freshmen, so we want to get everybody's names.
Mhm.
And one kid who didn't even live on our floor, so I don't know why he was there. He was like, "Yeah, and say your pronouns." And then everyone was like, not realizing he was trying to make a joke, so everybody just shared their pronouns, and he looked super awkward. He was like, "Oh, I didn't know you were actually going to." And we're like, "Yeah, dude, you're the weird one."
Yes.
Um, they don't get it. They don't get it. Like, absolutely, I will. And I bet he I bet he freaked out internally when he heard one of the people at the table really does use the weird pronouns that he's afraid of from the
Uh-huh.
internet.
Yes.
Um, and then he
Oh, that's so
lost
funny.
Cards Against Humanity, so that's even
And then
funnier.
he lost Cards Against
How do
Humanity.
you lose the game of being offensive, dude? Come on.
That's amazing. That story is amazing. You know, I feel like it's very neurodivergent to take that troll comment literally and then just actually share your pronouns. And it's
They're
like,
like, yeah, of course, because they can't be like, oh no, I was joking after you do it, because it's like,
yeah,
well, I guess you know now. That's
yeah.
super funny. So, haha.
That's so funny. I'm imagining like one neurotypical dude bro in a sea of like neurodivergent like queers. Like, oh no, what have I
Oh my
stepped
God,
in?
the trans med shows up to the queer get together and is like, oh no, oh no.
It's so fun. Oh my gosh. Well, I think you won Cards Against Humanity that day. So
Thank you.
there you have it.
Trophy.
Oh, that was such a great story. So let's talk a bit about disability and chronic illness, because both of us are disabled, but in different ways, I imagine. So, what is it Marfan or Marfan, or how do you even say the syndrome that you have?
I say Marfan, but some people say Marfan,
Okay,
including my cardiologist. So whichever you prefer, I guess. The guy is who invented it is dead, so he can't really tell us
there.
what the actual thing is. But
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
Marfan
what is it?
syndrome. Yeah, it is. I've been giving this explanation since I was like, I always say like little kid. I was never little, which is part of the point. But Marfan syndrome is a genetic connective tissue disorder. It's fairly rare. It affects about 1 in 5,000 people. And it basically affects your fibrillin 1 gene. I say basically and then say a genetic term. It's the part of your genetics that controls like the elasticity and the strength of your connective tissue. So in a Marfan patient like myself, it's more elastic, so hypermobility, being able to do party tricks like this. And also your connective tissue is prone to spontaneous breakage, which can cause quite a few life-threatening symptoms. The biggest being aortic aneurysm and dissection when your aortic root, as if you can see my heart down here, is expanded bigger than normal. I actually got my aortic root replaced in June, which is a
Mm,
surgery that most people with Marfan syndrome have to get at some point in their lives. Um, so that means avoiding strenuous activities that could kind of push your connective tissue past its limit, because you want to avoid things like spontaneous breakage or a random lung collapse. Or when I was right before my 16th birthday, my the sac surrounding my spinal cord, which is made entirely of connective tissue, just spontaneously sprung a leak, and I didn't even know that could happen, even though I've been living with it my whole life. So
wow.
it affects the whole body. It also affects the eyes. As you can see, I'm wearing um, very, very thick glasses, and
Oh,
have been since I was a very little kid.
hmm.
Um, People tell me to get cooler glasses. I would love that, but I can't see. So I've embraced them. But yeah, it affects a whole lot of parts of the body. Unfortunately, in my case, I wouldn't call it like severe because I don't know if like it exists on such a linear spectrum.
Mm.
Because like you need 7 out of 15 symptoms to be diagnosed, and it can be any of them, stuff like that. But um, I like experienced bad eyesight. I had pretty severe scoliosis as a kid, got spinal fusion surgery when I was 13. I have the flattest feet you've ever seen in your entire life. I made a TikTok, I think like 6-ish months ago,
Yeah.
where I showed a bunch of Marfan symptoms, and the top comment with like 20,000 likes is like, "Oh my God, your feet. Like, I've never seen anything like that in my entire life." And I'm like, "Oh, well, good thing I didn't take my friggin' socks off if that's the reaction." Um, but yeah, and it also makes you, obviously you can't tell this on the stream, but makes you very tall and also very slender,
Mm.
and very long phalange, so really long fingers and toes. So you can see it, and there's a lot of stuff that you can't see as well that is pretty scary. But you get through it.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be me, as they say.
Well, congratulations on getting the medical care you needed back in June. That's wonderful.
Shout out to Hogue. They're good.
Nice. That must be your surgeon or your doctor.
Oh, say it again.
Is Hoag a medical
Oh, it's the
facility?
hospital. The
Okay,
hospital, yeah.
gotcha. People are now asking for your TikTok. So everyone, if all of Christopher's links are on that link pile of things, cpikoart.art/links.
It's
Um,
pinned, that video that I'm talking about.
oh, it's
Um,
pinned. There you go.
yeah, it's
We'll have to go
pinned. So
watch it
you,
later.
yeah. I showed it to my surgeon and my cardiologist, and they were like, "This is cool," and I was like, "Thanks." It got more views than I was expecting. It's so all of the videos that I have that go viral on TikTok are always like Marfan or chronic illness related. Like I just had one go fairly viral the other day that was about like an ableist microaggression. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just very cool to like, well, it's not cool to not know anyone with your chronic illness in real life, but it is very cool to like suddenly meet dozens of people who have your exact same experience and illness on the internet, that by the magic of the algorithm you were brought together. Like that's so beautiful. Like there are hundreds of people with chronic illness in that comment section that are like, yeah, like I get it. And I'm like, I know I get it. It's so cool that we have a community that's like knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and honestly, I feel like disabled people kind of led the way with COVID and everyone having to stay home,
Mhm.
because it's like we've already been home. We've already learned how to make
Yep.
community online. Welcome to our spaces that we already made. Like,
You're
here we
welcome.
are.
You are very welcome.
We already figured it out. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so cool. So how do you feel that Marfan influenced your gender socialization and current trans identity? You've mentioned this a little bit, but I imagine there might be more to expound on.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, is like a little, I remember as a little kid in elementary school, um, I I actually remembered this recently. I had a care attendant at school. I didn't take like special education as a little kid, but I did have a care attendant for those periods where I had to be like not participating in a lot of physical stuff. And like I think his name was Mike or something. Like instead of hanging out with like the girls and boys in PE, and the boys, you know, help set up all the gym equipment and the girls kind of sit and like gossip in a circle or whatever second grade girls do. I like hung out with Mike and we played on scooters and stuff. So like that's kind of the metaphor for how Marfan like affected my socialization, where it was just like I was literally separated from all of the gender socialization that typically happens when you're a little kid. Like, of course, you know, it starts even before you're born with stuff like gender reveal parties and things like that. And, you know, from birth, a lot of, if not most parents, you know, push their kid into a certain gender role. Boys wear blue, girls wear pink, you know, boys play in the jungle gym all rough, girls do tea parties, like just simple stuff that we like know is associated with each gender. But a lot of people don't really think to unpack. Like parents don't think they're hurting their kid by picking pink for their girl or blue for their boy, stuff like that. But when you're kind of on a third category, like they have made you non-binary in a way, like they have made you queer because you are disabled. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and um, like that just fundamentally affected how I really didn't have a sense of gender identity, like I mentioned, until high school. Because even in middle school, of course, I did theater, as all gay people are obligated. And like the first big role I got, ironically, in middle school was Mulan.
Oh.
Um, so I was like, this is gonna come back later. But like you know, my first relationship was with, but like before I came out was with a queer girl from theater. And
Yes.
I knew that I shouldn't have been doing that as like a seventh or eighth grader, but not because like I was a girl and she was a girl, but because I thought my parents would be mad at me for dating at 13.
Mm-hmm.
I have immigrant parents and they're like, no boyfriends, like before you're 16. And that's why
You're
I thought I
like, but
was in
what about
trouble as a little kid.
being a
Yeah, what
boyfriend?
about a girlfriend? And then
What if
I'm
I'm
the
the
boy.
boyfriend?
um, yeah, exactly. Like as when I got caught for having a girlfriend in middle school drama, like the number one thing I I was scared of, I was like, oh my God, my mom found out that I kissed a girl. I'm not supposed to have a relationship this young. I'm gonna be in so much trouble. Like I wasn't afraid of homophobia or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that as a little kid because I didn't really consider, like I knew that we were queer, or like something different than what is typically expected. But I never like really identified myself as like I am a girl in love with a girl. It was just like, oh well, I really like this girl as a 12-year-old. And like gender didn't really come into it
Mm-hmm.
until other people brought it into it.
Yeah.
It was just so natural to me, which was just like I have a crush on this girl who wears red lipstick at 12 because she watches Miranda sings on YouTube. Like that's just it's just natural. And then when I was older, like going through puberty and then like realizing that the world is terrible because that's what happens in middle school. Everybody's miserable.
Yeah.
I
A lot of hormones
was
in middle
like,
school.
yeah, a lot of hormones. I was just like, oh, well, I am a girl, but I'm ugly. Like, I don't,
Mm.
I don't look like this girl that I'm in love with. She's gorgeous, she wears makeup, she wears all these beautiful clothes. Even all the people in drama are like so well put together and
Mm-hmm.
so cute. And then there's me, the little, disabled girl who like at that point I had very low self-esteem. I was like, I am ugly because Marfan syndrome made me this way. I had the very I find it a sad attitude where it's like if somebody asks you, would you take a magic pill like to cure your disability? And I like at that point in my life, I was like, yes, 100%. I want to be attractive. Like I want to be typical. I want to be normal because even though my disability didn't affect me too much, like is it like internally at that point in my life, besides having surgery in the seventh grade, the main thing was like, I don't want to be ugly anymore because people with my body type and, especially as a young girl, like being really, really tall and being really, really like uncomfortably skinny to a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
makes you unattractive. My big the classic cliche of the brunette took her glasses off and suddenly she's the most beautiful person you've ever seen in your entire life. And I was the one kid who, if I took my glasses off, I wouldn't be cute. I would fall down the stairs. So it's, it's not exactly the same
Yeah.
option in the rom-com.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, all of that insecurity and all that stuff um, was brought on by feeling otherized in my disabled body because people would I got bullied as a kid. People would make fun of how I look and stuff I couldn't change as what typically happens with disabled kids. um and it actually wasn't until, like I mentioned a little bit ago, like forcing myself to kind of reach that goal of like being really cute and feminine, where I was like, oh, this also sucks. Like, great, fantastic. So I thought I was super ugly. Then I tried to not do that by doing all these things that would make me look like everybody else. And I also hate that. And then that made me realize, oh, maybe, I'm not a girl after all. And that's what the problem was all along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's interesting because I don't remember like hearing trans for the first time. Like, um, I feel like I just mentioned this somewhere else because I just thought of this example so quickly. Like I didn't watch Miles McKenna or anything like that in middle school, or
Mm-hmm.
like those types of YouTubers who were like kind of the first to be publicly trans.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people like account their coming out as like, oh, I heard that word from this public figure and that's me. I don't I have no clue like remembering or thinking that like that was an option at all until the only kind of option that I had was, well, you can be an ugly girl and be sad, or a more attractive feminine girl and be sad, or you could be a boy. And then very quickly I was like, well, I like that option. So I picked that and rolled with that. And I immediately felt attractive. I started caring about, the way that I put myself together. And suddenly me being tall and having broad shoulders and everything was an asset and like helped with my dysphoria and made me feel like attractive. And my otherwise flat chest that, made me feel unfeminine and unwanted, was like, oh, I don't even have to bind. Like I can just wear a shirt and it's not even a problem. So yeah, it's not even like my disability caused all these problems because I don't want to blame Marfans. it's like the ableism that I faced because of it, right? So like if
Mm-hmm.
everyone was supportive around me and like uplifted my body and made me feel cute and all that stuff, then I wouldn't have felt so miserable and felt like I had to force myself to be something that I wasn't. But
Right.
in the end, like if I didn't do that, would I be out as trans today? Like who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And it now, like confidently, I can say if anybody offered me a magic cure, no way in hell I'm taking that. Like I love what I have become, even if it, came with a lot of trauma as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and honestly, like kids would ask me that a lot in elementary school and
Yeah.
middle school and high school and stuff because like that's their only inkling of what disability is, and I was the one of the only like visibly disabled kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know what I would be without my disability. Like it fundamentally affects like literally everything about me. Like my parents are 5'7", I'm 6'2". Like I have, big big old glasses. Like I have a different body type than my sisters. Like all this stuff, it fundamentally affects just how I look, like at a base level, and like how I've experienced life up until this point is
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally affected by my chronic illness. So
Yeah.
if I got that magic cure, would I be myself? Like I don't think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice that the gender journey also came along with like disability acceptance journey too, and realizing
Totally.
that the ableists are the problem. It's not me, and I'm hot. It's fine. Like yeah, I feel good now. Like yeah, everything's good. Luckily.
Um, there's at least two threads I want to pull on from what you were just saying. One is I know for me, I always felt like I was never a feminine, girly enough girl. Like I felt like I
Mhm.
failed gender. Like I failed being a girl. I was never good enough at it. Like, and I mean, throw in the part where I'm also autistic and ADHD, so I'm not very coordinated. And I don't have the social skills of
Mhm.
cis women, typical cis women. Like, the ADHD would make me excitable and interrupt people and whatever. And people didn't expect that behavior from women and girls. They did expect that behavior from guys. And so, for me at least, there was this sort of transformative moment where when I realized I was some non binary transmasculine flavor instead of a girl, um, like all of a sudden, all the things about me that were wrong, quote unquote, as a woman were just okay as a guy. It's okay to be fat when you're a man. It's okay to be hairy when you're a guy. It's okay to be loud and interrupt. And, like, I don't think it's okay to interrupt. Like, that kind of sucks. And that's part of our overculture of, like, the patriarchy that is rude. And I don't like it. Um,
Mhm.
but there's all of these things about me that now make sense that never did before. And so, kind of hearing you talk about some of these pieces, like, you are really tall and kind of flat chested, and so it's like, yeah, both of those read as guy.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You mentioned like weight, like
Mm-hmm.
as much as like you see the double standard with like fatness with like men and women is like I would get made fun of for being super, like obviously being skinny is the standard. I'm not gonna debate that. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people want to look like the unattainable, literally ill standard of being thin. But like as a girl, like people would make fun of me for being super duper thin. And then as soon as I started passing as a man, it was like totally normal to have the most chicken legs you've ever seen on a
Mm-hmm.
person, right? Like it's it's so ludicrous how
Yeah.
like men can literally be anything and look any way and like be rude and unattractive technically, and they can get any opportunity they want, and like as soon as you are a little bit out of the standard as a woman, it's like throw you away, goodbye.
Yeah.
And I wanted, someone in the chat earlier mentioned like is wishing,
That was my
it's
next
normal
thing I was
to,
going to ask about.
yeah,
Yeah.
normal to
So,
wish that you don't like your disability.
so
You want to go ahead.
yeah, I want to talk about disability acceptance. And so, yes, I was formulating that was my second question I wanted to pull on. So I think it's really common in my experience in disabled spheres and in gender diverse spheres to wish you could just magically change. For
Mhm.
me, magically be able bodied, have more energy, like, have the body parts that I wish I had and not have the body parts I don't wish I had, etc. It's like
Mhm.
the most common exchange I see in trans Discord servers is like, oh, I wish I could give you my boobs. Oh, I wish I could
Yeah,
give you this
look,
other
we
body
could
part.
trade.
Like, let's trade body parts. Like, it's so common. Like, probably every day, thousands of times a day, that interaction is happening in trans discourse. And so there's this really big, it's almost like I don't know. I feel like I might be using this word wrong, but it's almost like a zeitgeist. There's like this big idea looming in
Mhm.
trans minds and disabled people's minds of like, if only I could just wave a wand. And so I'm curious about, what does it look like to go on a journey of disability acceptance, of trans acceptance, to, I don't know, let go of that fantasy and be comfortable with the reality of what is, and what is the payoff of doing that emotional work of like getting comfortable with that. Like, what do we
Totally.
get at what do we get at the end, because there is something you get at the end. And so, I want to highlight that because I can hear it in you that you've gotten there, and I want other people to hear about it too.
We all get a small gift box when you finally get there, mailed to your mailing address. I I first want to mention to the person who made the comment, like, you are not a bad person for not liking or being at that stage where you're like, I hate this. Like, I hate being disabled. I hate this specific part of me. Like, you are not like a failure to the disabled community, or if you're trans, you're not a failure to the trans community. Like, it makes sense why a lot of people feel that way, because the society that we're in is not built for us. It is built to quite literally exterminate us. And it is the natural thing a lot of the time to feel like, oh, well, I'm just going to agree with what the world is telling me. And this is how I feel. And that's okay. Um, and of course, there's nothing I can do to force you to love your disability. I'm not going to be like, you're going to be kicked out if you don't love being deaf in that specific example. But I would say personally, like, I have gone through all of those stages. Like I said, I was diagnosed at 18 months old. So I have never known anything else but disability. And I think that gives me a pretty unique perspective, actually. Like, a lot of people, and of course, this is totally fine, like, realize that they're disabled later in life, whether it be neurodivergence or, oh, all of these symptoms that I've had are EDS or some other connective tissue thing, or like, I'm actually autistic, whatever. Like, they realize that giving it thought, like when you're kind of more mature, when you're in your teens or your early 20s or whatever, even later. But I think what a lot of people in that category tend to struggle with is, I've lost something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I was a part of this category that gets all of this, whether it be social privilege or literal ability to do something, and now I can no longer do it.
Yeah,
Um, and that's hard. It's really hard. Like, it's grief, like feeling
it
that
is
you've kind of
absolutely
lost a part
grief.
of yourself,
Yeah.
or like lost an ability, or lost kind of your position in society, for like more on the trans side of things. And like, as I said, it's totally okay to grieve that. I think just that's something I've never personally had to experience in the same way, because I haven't lost anything. I just never had it to begin with. Right. So, like, when I was in, middle and high school, and people were asking me, like, oh, would you take this magic cure? I was imagining a future that is, I have never experienced and I will never experience. Like, what if I could see perfectly? What if I was, 5'10" instead of 6'2"? What if I was, you know, a typical weight for my height? What if I, you know, didn't have to wear these ugly, quote unquote, ugly orthotics on my feet so that I can walk properly? Like, why did I have to wear a back brace? Why can't I just, like, even today after getting spinal fusion surgery, I don't have like a straight torso. Like, one of my hips goes out fairly severely because they left part of my spine unfused. And that's still something I struggle with self-esteem wise. Like, I don't wear tight shirts because I don't want people to see that part of me a lot of the time. But the thing is, with like me experiencing that, is like I mentioned, it's purely imagination, right? But
Mm.
when you do feel like you have literally lost something, whether it be your hearing or your eyesight, or like your symptoms of your neurodivergence get like more severe or pronounced as you like get older, like you are literally losing that. Like it's not just an imagination. So you kind of have to like come to terms with that, and it's very scary. And luckily, I have not had to deal with a literal grief of losing something. It was just like ableist assumptions of what I should be able to do and what I should look like and who I should be, and like swatting those away. And I do think that like being trans kind of helped me with that. Like when I first came out as trans, unfortunately, I had a 6 month period where I was like bitter about being trans. And I thought the only way I could be a valid trans person was immediately going on testosterone, scheduling my top surgery. You know, there was another guy in my grade who came out before me who like already had his hysterectomy scheduled for after he graduated high school. And I was like,
Wow.
I have to be like that in order to like be normal, like because
Mm,
I can't be cis, so I have to be kind of the grade A trans person, right? Um, and actually, luckily in my grade, there was this other person who was non-binary, had bright yellow hair. I knew them in middle school, like under their dead name, and like then they came back to high school and they had come out as trans, and they wore um, can I say dick? They wore little earrings like to give their graduation speech. Like they had all
nice.
like this cool gender expression and like very clearly didn't fit into that box.
Yeah.
And I had both of them in my English class before I came out. So like I was exposed to kind of I wouldn't say the extreme ends of the spectrum, but you know what I mean, of like gender nonconformity versus um, like being very strict with what we expect the
Hmm.
perfect transsexual to be, right?
Yeah.
And I realized like, and I can talk about a bit about grief with this, is my disability kind of prevents me from medical transitioning. Like I have kind of, it's a little difficult to deal with anesthesia because of my Marfan syndrome and my height and my weight. Like when I had my surgery when I was 13 to get my spine fused, like it was 3 hours longer than normal because
Wow.
they messed up the anesthesia and they
Oh
couldn't
no.
wake me up very easily. Like that was my first experience with surgery, was
Wow.
nearly not waking up.
Yeah.
And testosterone raises your blood pressure. And one of the things I take is a blood pressure suppressant or a beta blocker, because an aortic aneurysm dissecting could mean death in 6 hours, right? So
Right.
at that time, my parents, and I never came out to my parents. They found out very quickly because I'm a terrible liar. So like they're like, my mom holds up a binder
So
that my then
relatable.
partner had given me, and we're like, what's this? And I'm like, a compression top. And then she just looked at me and I just started crying my eyes out. Like that's a week
Oh.
after I came out. And like of course
Oh.
they're fantastic. Shout out to my mom. She has like a protect trans youth uh phone case that I designed
That's
now. And like
amazing.
of
I
course the
love
first few
that.
months are always hard. And the number one like issue that they had was not like, oh, we don't want you to be trans. It's like your identity and like what we perceive as being trans, which is like medical transitioning,
Sure.
is scary because you are also disabled. Like we do not want
Right.
you to be in danger because you want to change your body in this way.
Hmm.
Um, and like that's reasonable to me. Um, I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, like that,
They
maybe
foresee
that's
some
not.
challenges you're gonna navigate, and they had feelings about it.
Yeah, and like similar thing which where my parents were like, I think a lot of trans people have heard this, is like, I don't want you to face discrimination, stuff like that. Um, and at the time I was like furious. I was like, what do you mean you can't allow me to do these things? And I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria by my primary care physician, and she's like, let's talk to the endocrinologist about testosterone. And my mom was like, can we slow down, please? Like there's, so many things we need to consider. And like when you're in that stage as like a kid, I was like 16, um, it feels like my mom is being transphobic and she's not being reasonable, which a lot of the times is usually what's going on. But in my case, it was like truly was more complicated. And like hearing that out was having to also come to terms with like, maybe I can't be that most attainable trans person. Um, And over the next couple years in high school, I just slowly like kind of came to terms with that, where it's like, okay, maybe I can't go on T, but my voice is pretty low for what's considered to be a girly voice. And, like I mentioned, I have a pretty flat chest already, so I can just bind when I feel like I need to. And I've got pretty broad shoulders. I'm tall. Like that's enough for me. Like taking what I already have, because I couldn't get more.
Yeah.
And like accepting that is like, this is a fine trans body. Like I'm not less worthy because I didn't get top surgery at 16, stuff like that. Um, and I was going to mention something else. What was it? Oh, I'm forgetting now. But yeah, I would definitely say like, oh, I remember now. Another thing I got involved in high school, probably my biggest, well, not probably, definitely was my biggest thing in high school, is I was on the debate team.
Nice.
And shout out to the debate team. Number one ranked the last 2 years of my high school career.
Were you Lincoln
Didn't peak in high
Douglas
school,
or
I like
cross
to say.
examination?
Oh, I did parliamentary.
Nice.
So neither
Okay.
of those.
Yeah,
I think ours is the least popular. But
it
the
is.
thing about debate, as some people may know, is you wear like fancy clothes.
You do.
So
Yeah.
when I was like a freshman and a sophomore, I was first. It was funny. I was the only freshman on the debate team, and I was the only freshman girl on the debate team.
Hmm.
And I didn't particularly have nice dresses or anything like that, but I still had to wear them to be formal. And like the nicest thing that like the big first step that my mom helped me with is like a couple months after I came out, we like went to Banana Republic and like got me a suit for debate because I, go to 7 or 8 tournaments a year.
Yeah.
And like that was like felt as good as getting a tee shot for me, right?
I
Like
love that. Yeah.
I have a support, like I have support from my support system, and I got to wear a suit and I looked cool in it. Like
Yeah.
where, and I would bind it at debate tournaments. And at my last tournament of my senior year, we were at States. And I just turned to my debate partner and I didn't have my binder off. I just had my shirt and I was like, "Can you see my boobs?" And he goes, "No." And then I never wore a binder again. I
Nice.
was like, I trust this guy. I trust, like, that's kind of it. Like I've, been doing this for 2 years. It's kind of uncomfortable. I had 3 lung collapses in my high school career, one of which happened during a debate tournament, and I debated the whole time,
My
like
God.
3 days, and then
That's
we
ridiculous.
no, oh my God. Okay, now I need to tell this story. So the week before, it was like 2 weeks before finals in my junior year.
Yeah.
And I was eating Chinese with my mom, like close to our house, and I got this like weird shoulder pain. And I was like, well, this sucks. Like I was kind of just like doing this, like hoping it would go away.
Hmm.
And then my mom had to deposit a check at like the local bank. So I was like lying down in the car waiting. And I suddenly felt like this ripping, horrible chest, like the worst chest pain I've ever experienced in my life. And at that moment, I was like, "Oh my God, my aorta is dissecting. It's happening. Like the scary thing that they tell me is going to happen is happening."
Yeah.
And I called my mom crying. I was like, "Help me!" He runs out of the bank. Seeing your mom run because she wants to help you, kind of the best thing you've ever, like, you feel the most supported you've ever felt in that moment. She ran to the car, called 911, got to meet the sexy firefighters because they're always hot for some reason. Um, like,
it's
so
all
I
it's
don't
all that
understand.
pole climbing.
Yeah, seriously. They're like, "How are you doing today? We're going to take your blood pressure."
You're
And I'm
like,
like, "Oh, how am I
okay,
doing today? I don't know."
you can take my blood
And I like
pressure
got in an ambulance,
anytime.
and they figured out I had lung collapse. Just
Yeah.
so like with
Wow.
Marfan, you can just like spontaneously burst a lung, which I didn't know, but then I found out.
That sounds very scary.
Yeah, and I like got a chest tube, and it like fixes it pretty quick. Like it just allowed the lungs kind of like a balloon, like where in it has a little rupture, and it's not like the rupture itself that causes the lungs to collapse. Like the air will crush it. So they told me like the lung always loses. So if there's anything in there, it's gonna squish it. So if you take the air out, it'll just like pop up back to normal.
Mm.
So I got a chest tube, got that fixed. The next week, we were going, I lived in Northern California at this time. We were going to San Diego for a travel debate tournament. I was so excited. And they decided, let's not go on a plane just in case like the weird air pressure does something to your lungs, right? Because it had just only been a week. So we drive 8 hours down to San Diego. And that night, I'm like, it was currently, there were like fires happening in San Diego at that time, as if fires aren't happening all the time in California. Yeah. But I was like feeling a little wheezy, and I was like, oh, it's probably the smoke. It's probably the smoke. And, you know, my lung just healed. Like, it's probably just like having a bad few hours. Little did I know that at that point, at like 11 p.m. on that Thursday, my lung had collapsed again.
The same lung or a different lung?
The same one. Yeah. Lefty. Shout out to Lefty.
Lefty lung.
But like my debate team was so sweet. Shout out to high school debate. If any of you are in high school and haven't joined the debate team, do it. It's great. But like my coach was super sweet. He carried all my stuff inside for me. And also the good thing about being the only like AFAB person on the team is you get like your own room, because you can't like share. I think there was like a school policy, like you had to be like sex separated. So I got a king bed all to myself.
Nice.
The TV in my room felt great. And
that's extravagant when you're 16.
Seriously, I was like, this is the cool. I was watching infomercials on the TV, and I'm like, this is the coolest I've ever felt.
True luxury infomercials in a king size bed.
It was like a bacon. I remember the commercial. It was like a bacon, some sort of bacon tray device that like it was.
That's so funny.
Excuse me, I shouldn't say that. But
it was unnecessary to add to your kitchen.
A little bit unnecessary. If you're gonna eat bacon, just eat bacon. But anyways, I like woke up the next morning, and I like the one thing is like. You won't, it's hard to describe unless you've gone through it yourself. Like when your lung is collapsed, like you can feel the air in your chest, like your heart is in that area as well. And it's like beating through air. So it's like a very weird sensation. And I woke up with that, and I called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I feel pretty terrible. But I don't want to go to the hospital in a place where like we're not insured. Like we would go to Kaiser Permanente, but Kaiser Permanente North and South are different. So like all this stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to miss the debate tournament and all this stuff. And we kind of just like figured out a way to justify that I was fine. And like, that's not my mom's fault or anything. Like I also thought like, oh, it's just the smoke, you know what I mean? And you don't want to go through that traumatic thing again. So I went through the next 3 days, like, just slowly bending over more and more. Like as the days went on, like I asked to use the golf cart to get around the campus. I asked to sit down in all my debate rounds because I would get out of breath standing up, which I started doing after all of this debacle, and it's seriously changed the game. Shout out to sitting down. And then we like did really well at the tournament. We got to quarterfinals. I was like, sweet, that's good enough for me.
That's great.
Congrats 60-year-old me. And then we did an 8-hour drive back on the Sunday night. I went to school on Monday. I went back home. My mom's like, I need to exercise. She went to the gym. I still felt terrible. So I was like, let's go to the ER. And she's like, fine. At 8 p.m., we drive to the Kaiser Permanente ER. I feel horrible. I get a chest x-ray. My mom makes me do my math homework because I had a final next week. So I was crying doing my math homework. And then our doctor comes in and goes, so you see this line in your x-ray? Yeah. So your lung is like down here. And I was like, wow. Okay. Well, I got to skip finals because I had to get surgery.
It's like your sock fell down, except it's your lung.
Except it's your lung. Yeah. He's like, I overheard him talking to my mom. He's like, so this is what we call a moderate to large pneumothorax. But yeah,
this is what we call a seriously bad time.
Seriously bad time. And apparently in Marfan's, like it can just keep happening over and over again. So they decided to do surgery that like sticks your lung to your chest wall so it can't collapse again. So I got that surgery, got to do incompletes on all my classes. And yeah, that's that story. I don't remember what the original question was.
It's okay.
Um,
This has been a
but
wonderful series of stories. I was
wonderful
actually
crazy
president of the
tangents.
debate team.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You
So what did
mentioned
you do, Lincoln Douglas?
I did do Lincoln Douglas. That's why I asked about LD, because frankly, CX just looked too heavy. I didn't want to cart around all
It's
those
very intense.
chests of papers. And our school didn't do parliamentary. There was no one who was doing that. Other schools did, but our team was small enough, my little high school, that we just stuck to, like, I think we actually maybe only stuck to LD because the other ones were, it's too complicated to diversify. There's only like
Honestly,
8 of us on the team or something. So
yeah, that's only like 2 partnerships too.
yeah.
Not a lot of practice. It's funny in debate because like parley is kind of the lazy debate form in that like you don't have to prep beforehand, which is the best thing. Like, oh, I have to wake up at 6 in the morning, but at least I didn't have to research for 12 weeks before I came here.
Yeah.
And also improv is very fun. That's
Yes.
like my favorite part of it is like coming up with rebuttals off the cuff. And now I'm fantastic at
Yeah.
arguments
Well,
with
and I
anybody.
I wish I'd had that opportunity because I never went to state for Lincoln Douglas. I did go to state for improvisational speaking.
Mm,
I didn't
nice.
win, but I went to state for it. It was very fun.
It's so fun. It's so
Yeah.
fun. Oh,
And the school that's the state competition was held at ended up being the college that I went to when I graduated.
oh, cool.
Because that's
That's
like
such a
how I
fun
toured
coincidence.
colleges, is we go to all these debate tournaments around the state at all these different colleges. So I had a sense of what their campuses were like, and therefore I
Yeah,
knew which
like
one I liked the most. I was like, well,
it's
obviously it's
so
this
funny.
one.
Like knowing the camp, like I know where all the Stanford and like Santa Clara University classes are because those were the two big debate tournaments. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I know exactly where we're going. Don't even bother pulling up a map. I've been here 4 times. But yeah. But yeah, I think the original question was what's the payoff? The payoff is you just feel good. I have to say, like it's exhausting hating yourself and it's exhausting hating, your fundamental identity because you truly cannot change it. Like I couldn't pop my lung up by myself, that kind of faulty metaphor, but like a lot of people think that like your dysphoria is going to be fixed as soon as you get all the surgeries and like go on T and become stealth and all this stuff. Um, but if you don't also unpack like why all of those things make you feel so terrible, you're going to just find something else to be upset about.
Yeah. Because it's
Like
about decolonizing
suddenly
your brain.
yeah, suddenly your nose is too feminine or your eyes or, you know, your neck is you need to get, an Adam's apple implant or you need, to have your of course it's totally valid if you get face feminization or masculinization. All I'm saying is like you will always pinpoint that hatred and that insecurity onto something else if you don't unpack that hatred and insecurity for like why it exists. And same exists for disability. Like if you know that you can't change it, you really need to do the work to hope like or need to do the work to like not want to change it because it just makes you sad. And obviously it's a long process. I'm 21 and I was diagnosed at like 2 and I like just kind of got there in the last few years. So like I found that like disabled community helps with that a lot, like having disabled friends who also experience the same thing.
Yeah.
And even like you can vent to each other like this sucks. Like I hate having to take pills every day. I hate, only being able to hear out of one side or only being able to see certain things or not like I can't drive. I can't cross the street regularly. Like that sucks. Like I still complain about my visual impairment all the time. Like that's one of the most frustrating things that I deal with on a regular basis because like a lot of the times I just want to be able to see. Like
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to feel safe and like feel like I don't have to ask for help for everything. But I also have a roommate who will gladly read anything that I need for me because he values me and values my access needs. And I have friends who automatically take me to the nearest elevator instead of making me take the stairs. So like it's possible to be frustrated and have a support system that allows you to be frustrated but still helps you out in all the ways that you kind of need. So
You
you'll
know,
get
I,
there.
I gotta
We'll get there.
say, there is something really special about a friend and or partner who gets it.
Oh my
Like,
God, yeah.
like even if I'm in an unfamiliar space, even if I have just one person that knows me and gets it, my comfort level in that unfamiliar space goes way up. Like,
Thousand percent.
my spouse is also neurodivergent and trans, and like one of my best friends is in the chat right now and was totally my like accessibility buddy at this big camping event that we enjoy going to. And like, there's something just so special about having someone who gets it. And like for me, it's like I don't have to ask for someone to carry this chair for me. Like they're just willing to carry it for me, so I have somewhere to sit when we get where we're going. And like, side note, I'd love to get a wheelchair one day. Like, so the chair
Yeah,
carries
like
itself.
I can just
Imagine
wheel
that.
around instead.
Like,
It's
oh
so, this is
man.
another
Yeah.
tangent I'm about to go on, but like people get so up in arms about like ambulatory wheelchair users, like
Mm-hmm.
being able to walk, but you want a wheelchair. Like I use wheelchairs at like theme parks and like Costco. I
Yes.
use like the scooters because walking is hard sometimes and I want to
Mm-hmm.
sit down. And also those places like very rarely have chairs.
They
So like
do.
I would love to have a chair that can come with me so I can
Exactly.
sit down. Like
Yep.
it's
Yes.
really that easy. And
Yep.
people are so like, you don't deserve to be sitting down on a trans I don't get I don't understand.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Use a
It's
PSA, use a mobility aid if you need it and want it, and it'll make your life easier.
I had two
It's
come in the
worth
mail
it.
last week. They're my first
Oh
ones. I've
yeah.
got these gay crutches now. They're so gay. My
Oh,
friend, who is also a wheelchair user, um, got them for me as a gift because they got a small windfall of money and was like, I want to give all of my disabled friends like
oh,
mobility aids with my extra money. And I was like, you're such a
that's
good
so
person.
sweet.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
totally amazing. Totally amazing. Um, okay, so we've sort of blown past the whole talking about grief piece, which is okay. I was going to ask about parents and having grief, but we sort of mentioned that, so maybe I'll keep
Shout out to
going.
my parents. They're
Yeah.
doing pretty good.
Um, so, is there anything else you'd like to say about your experiences with visibility of your transness and illness? Like, you aren't stealth, and either
No.
like about your trans or about your illness. Like, it's on your body. People can see it the moment they look at you. I feel like I also don't pass like as a guy, which is not necessarily a goal of mine. One day I might, but you know, what is how what is that like? How does that feel? Are you comfortable with it? Is it uncomfortable? Does it vary moment to moment? What else do you want to say about
Yeah.
that whole thing?
I would say my transness is probably less visible than my like disability. Like I'm very open about being trans. So like
Mm,
if I'm walking somewhere you might not know, right? Like but if I pull out my laptop and you see the he, him, and these them pronouns on my laptop cover, or you hear me talk, or I like for some like I'm stretching backwards and you see, oh my God, he has boobs. Like you might notice, but I tend to pass on like a pretty regular basis. And it's kind of scary
mm,
passing. Like when I was at my freshman orientation, I was like, you can I'm very lucky where like at my university you can pick your pronouns and your preferred gender and you don't need to like provide documentation or anything. You can just like say I'm telling the truth and they'll put you um in uh like if you want to be in the men's dorm you can be, if you want to be in the women's dorm you can be, and like gender inclusive housing is an option. It's really cool. But like uh I was freshly wearing like I had just gotten little holographic like he, him, and Z them pronoun pins from my friend
nice.
Doodle People. Um, Shout out to Alice. And I was like so excited to wear them. And then I was in my dorm room with two other guys, cis guys, and one of them said the T slur. And I was like,
Oof.
I'm gonna quickly remove my uh my pronoun pins without saying anything, and make sure that I always have my deep voice on so that he
Mm,
thinks that I'm
yeah.
cis. Like being stealth, and like suddenly, like your transness could be like a source of harassment or violence. Like is kind of the scariest thing. Like, even I was walking home yesterday from campus, and I overheard the guys next to me like angrily saying the word transgender. Like, I had no idea what the context was, but I'm like, I'm just gonna keep walking slowly, and hope that they don't turn around and somehow clock me or stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it's but anyways, like with visibility and stuff, I would say my illness is probably the most visible part about me. Like, I didn't wear shorts until I was 18 because I was afraid of people looking at my, I think I called them the most chicken leg out of chicken legs earlier, which is like a self roast. Oh my God, self roast of my chicken legs, lol. Anyways, like, I am like very noticeably thin. And like there's kind of no getting around that. Like, I have weirdly long, quote unquote, weirdly long fingers, and I have these extremely thick glasses, and whenever I'm looking at something that's more than like this far away, I go like this and I squint to like see things. And I hold my, where's my phone, I'll like usually hold my phone like this close to my face. Um and like, people can clock, oh, that's a disabled person, like, or they'll see me sitting on the ground waiting for something because there's no chairs, or I cross my legs when I stand because it's easier to be balanced. Like, there's all these things of like that quote unquote normal people do not do. And that visibility, like, I've also come to terms with, like, I'm not necessarily scared to be harassed or anything like that. Like, the worst kind of microaggressions that I go through are like people asking way too many questions, which I'm sure like you've gone through and a lot of disabled people have gone through, which is like, oh, well, oh my God, the worst is with my glasses. They're like, I'm like, hey, can you help me read the menu? And instead of helping me read the menu, they go, oh, but you're wearing glasses. And I take a deep breath and I'm like, yes, I am aware that I'm wearing glasses. I still can't see. Like, I'm still low vision. Like, my vision is 20/100 in my right eye. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not, and then
Wearing
I'll
glasses
say
doesn't
that.
solve the lighting in this restaurant or whatever,
No, it does not.
or the font
And
size on the
or the
menu.
fact that the font is 9, like,
Yeah, yeah,
and then they're like, oh, but why don't you just get surgery? And in my head at this point, I'm like, can you just read me the menu?
yeah.
Like, please, I'm begging you. Like, I
I'm not
don't want
asking
to
you about your
explain.
hemorrhoids. Don't ask me about
Yeah,
my eyeballs.
like, I don't want to explain my lens dislocation to you right now.
Yeah.
Like,
I
a lot
just
of able
want
people,
soup.
please, but I can't read what the soup is. Um, like, it's so frustrating how so many non-disabled people like feel entitled to like, and so many cis people feel entitled to marginalized people's entire story and like
Yeah.
entire body, and like, what makes you exactly this way? Have you had the surgery? Why haven't you had surgery for your eyes? Why, blah, blah, blah. Why are you in a wheelchair? What
It's like,
happened to
do you
you?
want to
And the
give me a
worst,
million
like,
dollars to fix all of it?
like,
Thanks.
thank you very much.
If you're not
I'll
going to
take it.
contribute to my GoFundMe, then you can heck right off.
Yeah, I'll take a check. Like, and of course there's
One
the people
thousand
who just go
dollars per
like,
answer.
exactly, pay me for my labor. Especially with like
Pay me
people
for
who
my
go,
labor. Yes.
yeah, literally. Like, and this tends to happen with like kids too, because they haven't been taught to say it better. But I've had plenty of adults say it too. Is like, what's wrong with you?
Uh huh.
When it's like, I understand saying like, what's wrong with you? Like, when you're angry at somebody, like they cut you off in traffic or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
someone genuinely asking, finding a disabled person who looks disabled and being like, what the it's like basically saying like, what the hell is that? Right? Like I'm a freak at a freak show, and like, something that I've experienced a whole lot throughout my life, because my illness is so out, like, visible, because I am literally the textbook definition of what someone with Marfan's looks like. Like,
Mm-hmm.
every time I get nurses and doctors in my comment sections, they're always like, we read it, we had a unit on Marfan syndrome, and you're quite literally the encapsulation of everything that they described. And I'm like, yep, I know. My picture was on the Marfan Foundation website for a decade. Like, I get it. I'm quite literally what Marfan's is. And like, being stared at throughout your whole life, by children,
Hmm.
by adults, by old people. Like my most recent experience that I remember is like I was visiting my parents and I was dropping stuff off at the mailbox, like the post office. And I like my mom drove me. It was half of a block walking into the post office and then walking back. Little did I know that an old lady had stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, turned around to watch me go into the post office, stared at me through the window for the few minutes I was in there. And then when I came out, she turned back around to watch me go back into the car. And when I went into the car, my mom was like staring daggers out the window. And I was like, what's wrong? What happened? And she's like, there's a bitch behind you looking at you really loud. And the old woman scurries away. Like, there's it's funny because like I can't see very well, as I mentioned. So
Uh-huh.
I don't always notice when people are staring, but my mom does. And she has
Yeah,
no problem being like, what the hell are you looking at? Which is fantastic.
I love
Um,
that.
but yeah, like people kind of just treat you like a circus animal when you're visibly disabled. And like I love it. Obviously, I'm doing an interview about it. Like I love talking about my disability and my experiences. But if your automatic assumption is that I am less than human and like an exhibit that you can gawk at, uh, you're not well meaning. Like it's not genuine curiosity. It's like poking at a cage and hoping it does something. So yeah, it's a struggle, but I do like kind of one of my friends has EDS in the Disabled Student Union. And she's like, when I saw you and I saw your fingers, I was like, oh, I think he has Marfan. And she was right. So like it's nice to be visible and kind of be a beacon for awareness as I have been through my entire life because I like the Marfan community deserves it in my opinion and we could use a lot of visibility. So if I can be that visibility and take those terrible questions and be able to make a platform like I have and be happy with who I am despite hate comments or whatever, like I can do that. I can take that. I've been through 8-hour open heart surgery in the last 3 months. Like your hate comments are not gonna affect me. Like I can be that beacon if we need me to be. But yeah.
Um, my affection and love for you grows as you continue to say words.
Thank you.
I'm really enjoying our conversation. I want to briefly apologize for not wording my last question very well. I feel like
Oh,
I
that's totally fine.
floundered a little bit. So on the topic of making sure that we pay trans people, just as a side note to folks in the Twitch chat, I have dropped links to Christopher's Etsy shop and case shop. Do you want to take a moment just to show us your cool phone case on your actual phone that you have
Oh,
nearby?
sure. So I partnered with Casetify for Pride Month, and this is one of the designs that I made. It's
So
my favorite.
cool.
Um, and I just released a personal collection with them that's disability and queer pride themed, which are all at that link. And that's very exciting. Like I was like, oh, they invited me back after Pride Month. But yeah, I make trans and queer and disabled stuff.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of it. And I make a lot of custom stuff too, not the cases, but like buttons and stickers. So if you use neos or, have quote unquote weird flags or unconventional flags, I got you. It's my favorite
Nice.
part of the job is
Nice.
making stuff for fellow weird queers. But yeah, thanks for the shout out.
Yes.
I love
Absolutely.
making stuff. So it's not just about the money, but I do appreciate um, getting paid for the work that I do and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah.
Maybe if you get to do another Pride line sometime, if you want to throw in some non-binary Pride stuff, that'd be rad.
Oh yeah.
I would
I
love
wish
a
I
non-binary
did
Pride
more.
phone case. That'd be so cool.
I will keep that in mind for future. Of course, you are
Just throwing
valid.
it out there. Thank you. Yes, on stream we're just covered in non-binary everywhere, so
Yeah.
everyone watching us is just beholding the beautiful color scheme. Um, so, Christopher, how can society help make everyday life more accessible for people with Marfan syndrome?
That's a good question. Like I said earlier, Marfan syndrome, just with anything, exists on kind of a spectrum, right? So, like some people with Marfan, do like are able to see fairly well, like they don't have, lens dislocation, or they might not even have the stereotypical body type of, super tall, super thin, and they can kind of pass as not having Marfan. But I would say one of the number one things that would help just generally existing is having Marfan syndrome is like media needs to stop demonizing how we look. Whenever I make a TikTok video about disability, I would say at least 75% of the comparisons that I get, like, some people say like, oh, you look like this celebrity or you look like this celebrity, is getting comparisons to monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Slenderman, there was like a specific SCP. I think I have a list actually. I made a list from my most popular video because I was like, wow, these people are like a little mean, but I kind of think it's funny. The dad from Coraline, which is funny. Tristana Medeiros from Rec, Ender, like all of these, a child stick figure, like all of these things where it's just not a person, but you look like them because you have, yeah, they guessed the SCP correctly. I just saw it on my list.
Nice, nice. SCP
But
095 for those who don't see the chat.
yeah, it's like I would like to get more, Paul Danos than a literal monster that's trying to kill everybody, right? And like that can be a complaint with like a lot of disabilities. Like, Anne Hathaway's character recently had like a limb difference, right? And it was just the villain has the limb difference, or the person with dwarfism is the villain, or like the severely mentally ill person, as we've seen in Split and in Joker and in et cetera, is always the villain and wants to kill everyone. And like, if those stereotypes did not exist, like it would be easier to not exist as a circus freak, kind of like I mentioned earlier. Like, people, when I walk down the street, don't just see like a tall guy who like wears glasses. They see, oh, you look like this horror villain, and that's kind of freaky. Like, I want to know more about you because you freak me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I want, my body to stop being called freaky and disgusting, and like just allow me to exist as hypermobile without you getting freaked out that my fingers can do weird things, But yeah, I would say like a lot of people don't think about like just general ableism as like inaccessibility, because like if I walk into a space and I know that everybody thinks that I'm a freak and that I don't belong there and that I'm not on their level, like that space automatically becomes not safe for me and not
Yeah.
comfortable for me. Like, even in, speaking of ableism, like in my freshman year, again, a lot of stuff happened in freshman year of college. I lived on the third floor of my dorm building and I would use the elevator. And so many people in that dorm building, there were 9 floors, were so up in arms about anybody on the second or third floor using the elevator. They were like, if you use the elevator and you're not on the 4th floor or above, you're a burden to this entire dorm and you're ruining the experience for everybody else, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Wow.
And like, one girl stood up and said this like in front of everyone during an event. And I yelled at, I was like, some people are disabled. And then she got all awkward and sat down.
Yeah.
And like, they had to put signs up in like the elevator banks that said like, not all disabilities are visible. Please let everybody use the elevator, because it's literally an elevator. It's the most basic accessibility thing that everybody uses, and you're going to be up in arms about it. Like, being like, even if I needed it, and I did need it a lot of the times, like, I shouldn't feel peer pressure to exhaust myself by using the stairs because people think that I'm a burden, right? Like,
Yeah.
that social pressure to even potentially injure myself is like wild to me. Like,
Yeah.
that's so normal. And I hope that it's a little better, but like, considering how people are treating masks and stuff like that, I don't know how much better it is. But like, yeah, I would just say like try to unpack your biases as much as you can. If you think that somebody doesn't deserve something, like using an elevator, unpack why you think that and why you think it's lazy or worse off for somebody to use the elevator when you think they don't have a justification for it. Like, and also mind your own business. That's another that's another access need for me is
Yeah.
mind your own business, and the world would be easier. But on like material level, all crosswalks should have like sound indicators. A lot of the ones around my college campus do not, and that's really scary, especially living in LA where it's a like a car centric city.
Yeah.
So you will get hit by a car if you accidentally jaywalk. Um, like making text bigger, like it doesn't have to be 12 point on a sign or a flyer. Like it was really sad. One of the magazines on campus had this like beautiful new magazine issue, and I picked it up and went to read it, and the font was I've actually never experienced this before. The font was too small that I literally could not read it. Like even if I
Mm.
had it as close as possible, I couldn't read it. And I was like, just felt this like stunning disappointment that was like,
Yeah.
oh, nobody is disabled on your staff. Nobody,
Yeah.
because somebody should have said, we need to make this bigger. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is inaccessible for so many people. It was like literally like 10 point or something, like less than that,
Yeah.
on this magazine. And I was just, and the color contrast was also not accessible. So like, even if I could read the size of the text, dark background with dark text, like
Yeah.
it was a mess. So like, just think a little more, like if, different types of people are consuming this, how would that make them feel? Could they even experience it the way that I could? Stuff like that. So yeah, that's of course varies person to person, but just be nicer to people and the world will be a better place for everyone with Marfan and everyone with a disability. Honestly, we would feel a little more safe everywhere if we knew that people didn't, dehumanize us every time they see us.
Yeah. I'm curious if you use any sort of screen reader technology ever, or if you don't want to talk about that, that's also fine.
I do not, but I do realize that I appreciate it. Like when you have AirPods, like Siri, I got them recently. Siri will like read your messages to you,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, it's kind of nice. Kind of not having to, because like I said, it's kind of embarrassing, and this is internalized ableism talking, like having your phone this close to your face, like because it is a visual indicator of disability. And when people stand behind me in line, they see that my text size is like extremely big on my phone, so they can read literally everything that I'm doing. So yeah, I don't use screen readers, but I'm currently part of this research project for disability studies at my
Mhm.
university, where we're like doing a survey on like how to make social media more accessible, like how much people use access features and like how do you use them and how do we get people to use them, stuff like that. And I've had like the opportunity to kind of be the guinea pig of using a screen reader because I'm the person in the class who can't see very well.
Yeah.
So it's nice being able to experiment with that, but I don't need it on a regular basis. No.
Yeah. I've been working on using alt text more consistently in my social media and places that I post things. And it's caused a couple of things. First of all, it makes me think about, is whatever I'm about to share important enough that I want to take the time to write alt text? Because
Mm-hmm.
if it's kind of like mediocre, maybe I just won't share it because it's not good enough. It's not worth like taking that time. Um, but it also, when other people write alt text on images, sometimes they'll point out things that I hadn't noticed, and maybe it's just
Mm.
my neurotype that like I'm not picking up that detail, and so for some reason, like reading a description of an image that I also can see, like gives my brain all this extra information that I didn't have. Like I just didn't pick it up originally. So it's, I mean, I love watching shows with the captions on because I have auditory processing stuff with my like autism and ADHD, and so all the words run together in a big blob, and I'm like, I don't know what that is.
It's nice to get
Um,
the sound effects too. It's like
yeah,
growls, and I'm
yeah,
like, he did? Uh, like, great.
yeah.
It's
Well,
funny too, because like,
and when they describe the tone of it, right? So if it's like laughs
Angrily.
angrily. Yeah, exactly. Because with the autism, it's like sometimes I don't understand the emotion behind it. So there's so much more information that I get when I turn on these accessibility features. Even as someone who like maybe I'm not the like person they had in mind when they added closed captioning to their stuff. So
Yeah.
it's
It's
cool. I
interesting,
love it.
like being a visually impaired person who writes image descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
Because like luckily, like I made the image, so I like know all the details.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, a lot of the time, like people will point out stuff that I didn't see, which is kind of the point, right? Like if they wanted me to see it, why, like if they didn't care enough for me to see it, why would they put it in the description, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they wanted me to know that she's smiling or that the sun is shining or whatever. Like it's nice, like to get all the details, even if technically I can see the
Mm-hmm.
image. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's also fun. It's kind of fun to write them sometimes. Like I'm working for Look Deeper, which is a like disability creative magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And our next issue is coming out fairly soon. And one of the things we're thinking of doing with like a launch event is having like all the like it's kind of going to be in like a it's like a gallery style thing
Mm-hmm.
online where like you can read or you can have the image descriptions read to you. So like
Cool.
in the author's voice of like they're describing their art to you, and then the image description kind of becomes like poetry or a part of the art, and
Yeah.
that's really cool. I'm really into that.
That's why I love audiobooks read by the person who wrote the book. Because it's like I get to hear
They
their
get it.
voice, I get to hear the intonation they meant when they wrote it down. Like once in a blue moon, they will add a sentence that's not in the book. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, this thing." So it's like extra secret content. My inner completionist is like, "Yes."
Perfect.
It's so good. Um, so how does being trans and disabled impact your art practice?
Yeah, so it's like the whole thing, I guess, is the main impact. I started by making my very first art piece was it's called Take Me Home. And it's like a UFO that says "Take Me Home" instead of like the little beam, and then it has little pride flags in the dome. And
Cute.
it's referencing void punk, which is um, the fancy word for like uh, kind of embracing feeling alienated and like embracing your natural form as like a dehumanized person. So like for me, being disabled, being aromantic, being trans, all things that I get dehumanized for, and like instead of trying to prove my humanity to people who want to dehumanize me, I just go, screw it, I'm an alien, like whatever. I'm from a different planet, and that's fine. Um, like even the word Marfanoid, which is like a term for someone with Marfans, and it's a term for the body type as well, like very much sounds like an alien race. So coincidentally, I am literally named something that sounds like an alien race. And those first designs like were specifically about like transness and queerness, but then like as I realized more about my disability and started using the word disabled specifically, I realized that that was really the major part of that identity for me. So like from the very very beginning of making digital art and like sharing it online, it's always been about my identity as a queer and disabled person. Like I've been, doing art my whole life, as they say. My sisters and my mom are all artistic as well. And like the middle sister in our little trio, she used to draw me like the giant cast of characters in all of the shows that I really liked. So she made like a Mario one with all the Mario characters and all that stuff. And I would just like copy them down and like try to do what she does. And then that grew into whatever I have now, which is stickers and pins and buttons and shirts sometimes, and like the whole incredulous casetify thing that's like beyond my wildest dreams. So I'm happy that I've kind of stayed true to that part of myself. Like I haven't at least felt like I've kind of sold out and been inauthentic at any point of
Mm-hmm.
my art career. Like I feel like I'm staying true to myself and my identities, and the way that I make things is very much about my experiences and trying to uplift the experiences of others.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's been nice, just kind of you know, a little artistic diary kind of like all my self-portraits are deep about my experiences with like disability and transness and stuff. So that's been really cool.
Yeah. What brings you disabled joy?
Meeting other people with disabilities, I think, is probably the number one thing that like warms my aneurysm heart. I was trying to find a better way to say that. But like in my freshman year of college, I was very isolated as like a disabled person, especially because the campus that I'm on is very inaccessible, like incredibly inaccessible. And at that point, the Disabled Student Union on campus didn't exist. It was actually founded when the pandemic started in March 2020. And that summer of 2020, when we were all online, and I found the DSU because I like asked the disability minor specialist about it. She's like, "Oh yeah, there's like a crew of disabled people who all hang out," and I'm like, "What? Nobody told me." So I joined, and immediately I was like, "I'm in paradise. Like everybody gets it. Everybody's experiencing the same thing. You know, everybody like also wants to find community with other disabled people, and like that I'm grateful for that every day of my life. Like even though we've done all this advocacy that's friggin' exhausting, like in February, we occupied the administrative building for 16 days in demand for hybrid access and a bunch of other demands for Black and Brown students
Nice.
in collaboration with other clubs on campus. And like sleeping in an administrative building for 16 days sucks, but it was also one of the best experiences I've ever had as a member of a community. Like it was beautiful how accessible it was, how everybody cared about each other, how we had mutual aid going and we ate meals together and we brought a friggin' projection screen to watch Euphoria on Sundays, like because we knew we were in for the long haul. Like having community, even if it's community through struggle, is like so beautiful. And I don't think I really wouldn't trade that for anything. Like that's been one of the best parts of being in university and owning my disabled identity as an adult has definitely been community.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for sharing your experiences. I want to talk a little bit more specifically about the things that you've made because they are cool.
Thank you.
So how did you get into Pride product design? How do you go from being like a person with some devices that makes some cool stuff to like now you have an actual thing that people can physically hold in their hands and give you money for?
Yeah, I my first kind of dabble with like digital design was or like kind of simpler artistic stuff was Inktober back in 2019.
Mhm.
And I know I think the Inktober guy has gotten into some hot water since then. But it was like I challenged myself to do every single day, and I ended up doing it. Um, and I like kind of centered my designs around like liberation and social justice and all this stuff, even though like the words weren't explicitly about those subjects. Um, and I asked people, I was like, would it be cool if this was a sticker? And they were like, yeah, that'd be cool. And then I got a coupon to Sticker Mule, and I was like, okay, then I think I might do it. And I did it, and people bought it, and I was like, is this happening? Like I'm 18 and people are buying my little cute things for $3. And then like as that grew and I got more inspired and started, adding more pride flags and doing more designs and stuff, I got a button machine in December of 2019,
Mhm.
and that allowed me to follow like flashback to like March of 2017 or 2017, I started making custom pride flags, which are, if you look on my Etsy or on my Instagram, I have some recently posted. They're combinations of different pride flags that make up a single person's identity. So they're like a little artwork that can represent, the queer part of who you are. Um, and I was making those for free as like a 15-year-old. And then I decided, okay, well, I've made like 1,000 of these.
Wow.
Uh, it'd be cool if I could like make this wearable and like people could wear their identities on their sleeves in a way. And I started having people pay for my labor. Yay. And, making these designs to order. And it was so fulfilling, and it still is so fulfilling. It's one of my favorite things to do is like, you have 8 labels and you want me to make a little artwork for you. Like, I got you. Like, I'm going to make you something cute. And it's really cool to get to know all of the different combinations that can exist in queerness. And it's infinite, literally. Like, I've barely gotten the same combination twice, and I've made hundreds of them.
Wow.
And it's really cool to like be able to make that. And as I grew, like I said, added more identities, had more products like specific for specific types of people. And I've stagnated a bit now in terms of like making new products because of like last few months with recovery and stuff like that. But I'm hoping to get more into it with like this Casetify collection of like these graphic designs, kind of emulating my design style, and like hopefully expanding over the next year to even bigger pastures. But yeah, it's been really cool to go from, I'll send you a PNG that I made with Microsoft Paint, and now I send you a sexy little button in a cute package with purple packaging that matches my business cards.
Do you still use paint?
I don't know. I actually used my first Etsy earnings. Well, it took a while, but to get myself an iPad. So I had been
Nice.
using my phone. I had originally used MS Paint, and then I was like, this doesn't look great. So I started using Procreate on my phone. And I didn't have a stylus, so I used my finger. Like, I drew with just my finger and my phone from like May of 2019 to like for that whole year,
Wow.
which is pretty ludicrous. I don't think I could do it now. It's hard. And then I bought an iPad for my birthday the year after. And I splurged the $10 on the Procreate app. And now I know how to use like Photoshop and stuff too, but that's for extra fancy stuff. That's a little too hard for me now. But yeah, no more MS Paint. She's somewhere on my computer, but I hope she's sleeping soundly. She started my career. So I appreciate it.
I love that. So what about, you've talked a bit about your pride stuff. Do you have activism products that you want to tell us about that you make? And what is that
So
piece like?
I have a few that like donate to mutual aid and like community oriented efforts. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have a sticker design called Pay It No Mind, which is what the P in Marsha P. Johnson stands for. And
Nice.
that donates money to the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. Um, I have a sticker that I made during the big rush of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 that says Black Trans Lives Matter, and 100% of that is donated to the transgender I always forget the acronym. It's the TGI Justice Project, Trans, Gender Diverse, and Intersex Justice Project, which originally was run by Miss Major Griffin Gracie, who was at Stonewall. And those are 2 examples of like things that, like, me as a white trans man who typically passes, I am not the pinnacle of oppression. Like, I have safety in the fact that I am white. I have safety in the fact that I am a man. I have safety in the fact that I live in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can use that privilege to uplift the voices of Black trans women and communities that don't hold the privileges that I do, then I try to. Like, even like I mentioned, the sit-in, like, that was so beautiful to me because there's so few movements that you see especially like I'm at a PWI, primarily white institution for college.
Mm-hmm.
And like these like students of color have been through literal hell, and the university does nothing about it. They raised apparently $88 million endowment for Black Lives. They called it like the Fund for Black Lives, and Black students have seen none of it in the past 2 years.
What are they
Like,
using it for?
Exactly. It's just sitting there, and students are like, hey, could we get a little funding so that we don't drop out? And they're like,
Yeah.
maybe, but probably not. And like less than 5% of the student population is Black. Like less than 1% is Native or Pacific Islander. Like, and those numbers have stayed constant for the past 20 years. And like this sit-in that we did was like a culmination of decades of oppression of those groups of color, and then the kind of newer fight of like disability justice and disability advocacy that had been brought on, especially through the pandemic. And it was like this beautiful intersectional mesh of like, we are all fighting for the same thing and fighting for liberation. And if I, as the only white guy in the room, can use that to amplify the Black women leaders who have literally been doing this for their entire college career and aren't being listened to, then like, hell yeah, I'm going to do that. Right. Like, it's, as someone who's not immunocompromised and can literally put my body on the line, like, I will use that privilege however I can. And if I can bring that into my art by just donating a few dollars whenever I can to mutual aid efforts, like as we've been encouraged to do for the past 2 years and should have been doing for even longer than that, like that's the bare minimum. Like that love and that, you know, all those orders or whatever, like that funding is coming directly from my community. I should not be like, oh, well, I'm a privileged white trans man, so I can just keep all of this because I deserve it. Like there are people who are more deserving of the support and the love that I get. And if I'm going to get all of that, then I should be able to give some of that back, you know,
Yeah.
hopefully show that love to my community.
Folks
But
in the
yeah,
chat are agreeing that that's the right way to use white male privilege.
yay. And if, I mean, if I'm ever doing it wrong, I hope to goodness that I wouldn't hide in my shell and not take accountability, because I like, there's no point in like, I can't label myself an ally to like a community that I am not a part of. Like that's up to them. Like, and that was another thing with the sit-in is like, they were making jokes that like, usually I'm uncomfortable around white people because you guys suck, but you're doing pretty well. And I'm like, literally, I'm so honored to hear that, because like, and I don't deserve a medal for that. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
tolerable to be around based on like the centuries of oppression that you've been around. Like, great. We should all be striving towards that. And I'm glad you feel comfortable. Like, it's just so wild to me that like so many people don't. And of course I am not perfect, obviously. And this is not me saying that. It's like so few people try to do that work at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like try to make the people around them feel as comfortable as possible. Like if I do something wrong, the response is, oh, sorry, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's not arguing or belittling you. Right. And like more people need to do that. I don't know. That was a tangent, but like we should be giving back to our communities. Like everybody deserves liberation and happiness and to feel secure and safe. And we should contribute to that as much as we can. So I try to. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else that you want to say about either like stories that you have about designing your products, or do you have any favorite product designers, like other people that have designed cool Pride products, or do you feel kind of complete on this topic?
I can shout out a couple of my favorite Pride people. Juniper Bug, who goes by Howdy It's Junebug on Instagram. It is an anti-gender artist, and it makes a lot of cool stuff, like pins and or badges and stickers and stuff on its Ko-fi if you want to check it out. And then I also mentioned Arthur a while ago, who is at Uncle Gay. Also a wonderful trans artist. He's great. And who else? Who else should I shout out? They're like, those two were my inspirations to like start my shop in the first place. So I always try to shout them out when I can.
So fun.
You can't see it, but on the wall behind me, I have a flag print that is very cool that says, to be queer is to be holy. And it has a little angel with top surgery. And it's on a trans flag. That's by Samson Ceramic. Also another very cool artist. If you just go in my my following list on my Instagram. So many cool artists on there. Yeah, check those out. They're my friends and they're great.
Awesome. Well, I tried to type down as best as I could some of those things while holding Neferkitty here. Awesome. So, is there anything that we missed about being a disabled trans artist that you'd like to make sure that you say today?
um, Not that comes off the top of my head. Hopefully, through the 20 tangents that I went on, somebody found a nugget they can hold on to for the day. That makes them feel good.
I think there've been some great nuggets, especially around like disability and trans acceptance, like internalized acceptance. Um, Plus, it's fun to talk about debate.
Oh yeah, it's so fun. Like my dungeon master of my current D&D game is doing debate in like after college, like, and she was like, I'm trying Parley this weekend, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so fun, even though I don't do it anymore. It's very cool.
um, Christopher, can you share an experience with gender euphoria?
Ooh, that's one I've had recently. I guess I can talk about my sister one day jokingly called me her sibling,
Hmm.
like Xibling. And it's not even just like, oh, that's a very gender affirming term or anything. It's just like kind of exemplifies the effort that my family has put in over the
Yeah,
past five, oh
totally.
goodness, 5 years of being out as trans. And like, it's, even if it's like a little inkling of like, oh, even though, she's older, she's in her late 20s, like she she acknowledges that I, don't use just he him pronouns, and like
Hmm.
makes jokes about me being like an alien like I do, and all that stuff. Like it just fills me with a lot of warmth seeing that my family like is doing the best that they can to get it, and
Hmm.
is supporting me in all the ways that they can. So that's definitely a privilege that I wish more people had, is a really supportive family. But yeah, that's one little inkling that I've experienced.
Cool. All right, my last question for you is what would you like to make sure folks know about your perspective on gender and non binary or trans issues?
Don't be mean.
Hmm.
Like a lot of, like we mentioned earlier, like there's a lot of bitterness in trans community, unfortunately, because a lot of us are frustrated by the circumstances that we are given,
Hmm.
and that we can't really change. And a lot of people lash out from their internalized transphobia. They make fun of people who may be more marginalized than them, who
Hmm.
use weird pronouns or have, more unconventional gender expression or whatever, and feel that they are above them because they, you know, are normal, quote unquote, in the eyes of the cis world. But everybody should realize that we're all in the same boat. Like, you stepping on your trans siblings is not going to get you any higher. They're just going to keep raising the bar. So hopefully anyone watching this, and hopefully we'll get to this point in the community as a whole, but transness is not a curse. And you projecting that onto people who do find joy in transness um, really just makes the whole community a sadder place. So hopefully everyone who is going through internalized transphobia, everybody who is battling the medical industrial complex, everybody who is not in a supportive environment or who is, can somehow one day figure out a way to just accept everybody who comes along,
Hmm.
and help the most marginalized instead of making fun of people for existing as they exist. So yeah, I've I've grown from the little angsty um, binary trans man, all caps, from when I was 16 into the ZZM everybody's afraid of. So I, uh,
Or
it's
delighted
worth it.
by.
It's worth it to get through that. So hopefully, and it helps getting older too, and like realizing that a better future is possible. Radical imagination is the thing that's going to get us to liberation, because we should be fueled by our love for our community, not just the hatred of the people who let us down. So yeah.
That. So good. Well, thank you so much, Christopher, for being on the show. It's been such a delight to have you today. Just as
Thanks so
a
much for having me.
Yeah, totally. As a verbal acknowledgement of our cross promo timer that's been going off in the chat this whole time. Christopher Z he pronouns is a 21-year-old transgender queer and Marfanoid artist and activist behind cpikoart. His work radically celebrates Zir intersectional body, identities, and communities. And that hyperlink is cpiko.art/links if you would like to check out Christopher's awesome stuff. Um, Thank you so much. Genderful would like to thank our guests for being on this podcast. Feel free to join us live on Twitch on Mondays, check out the replays on YouTube on Fridays, and keep an eye on your favorite podcasting platforms for edited audio-only versions. As Nefertiti says, trans rights are human rights. That's right. Forgot to mention that next week's guest is Rio, and we're going to be discussing mental health and coaching for queer folks.